So today's Easter, and we're going to be looking at a series of videos by RADapologetics that supposedly prove the resurrection as historical fact. This is an extremely lofty claim to be thrown out to suggest that something is historical fact based on the evidence that you present. So we're going to be looking at each one of these videos individually and put them to the test.
10 reasons to accept the historical resurrection of Jesus as historical fact. The first eyewitnesses of the resurrection were women. Now, this is a big deal because women in Greco-Roman culture were not considered to be trustworthy sources of testimony. If you wanted to actually invent a story that was to show that somebody resurrected from the dead, the last person you would have discovering that resurrection would be women.
So this is a very common argument. The whole having women be the first one to the tomb would be embarrassing for the Christians since their testimony was worth less than a man's. But in reality, this is exactly what we would expect for this time period. Women were the ones primarily interacting with the dead bodies, whether it be bringing them gifts or applying ointments. Women were also commonly mourning. They were actually mourners that went around and mourned for leaders that would die. And so in reality, we would expect women to be the first ones to notice anything like this. And even if the story was invented, we would still expect women to be the focal point of the origin of the story. You could even argue that it would be embarrassing if it were men that were in the position instead of women. I'm not even sure if this would qualify for that requirement of being embarrassing.
The minimal facts argument concerning the resurrection. This was popularized by Gary Habermas, and these minimal facts are almost universally accepted by all New Testament scholars. And the facts are as follows. Jesus was crucified. Jesus was said to have appeared to his followers. You have also the conversion of Paul and James. And finally, the empty tomb.
So there's a ton of claims in this singular video that all would need to be analyzed at a much deeper level. But I want to talk a little bit about this idea of New Testament scholar consensus. So I'm lucky enough to attend a Christian university where professors and faculty get to write their own articles of faith and then send them to the institution for approval. This is something unique to this university. It's not applied everywhere. So let's take Biola, for example. Faculty must agree to this doctrinal statement, among others, before they're allowed to be hired. The scriptures are without error or misstatement in their moral and spiritual teaching and record of historical facts. They are without error or defect of any kind. So as we can see, this idea of New Testament scholar consensus might be a little bit tainted. Now, I'm not saying that no New Testament scholar has anything good to provide in this discussion, but throwing a blanket term out there, such as this, is really meaningless. I'd like to see the statistics of individuals who are of no faith and are New Testament scholars that are analyzing this. And I'm sure there would be a discrepancy.
The willingness to die for what was known. Many people will die for what they believe to be true, but no one will die for what they know is erroneously false.
Now, this is the single worst argument ever in the history of apologetics, of Christian apologetics, of whatever apologetics. The worst argument. And it qualifies for 3 different logical fallacies, and it's unbelievable that somebody would be peddling this. First, I want to mention tons and tons of people die for what they believe, right? Take radical Islamists, for example. Just because they die for what they believe does not mean what they died for suddenly has more validity. That is unbelievably ignorant and just ridiculous. So as I mentioned, this qualifies for 3 different logical fallacies. The first one is Galileo fallacy. This is the claim that because an idea is forbidden, prosecuted, detested, or otherwise mocked, it must be true or should be given more credibility. So if I had to pick one logical fallacy that this would fall under, I would say the martyr fallacy. This is that martyrdom is evidence of the truth of a proposition, as martyrs would not die for a lie. This is exactly what the Christian apologists are claiming when they appeal to this sort of evidence. Now, the last one is an appeal to personal certainty. In this scenario, the martyrs' assumed personal certainty is being advanced as evidence for the proposition. Think about that. 3 different logical fallacies all packed into a sentence. Unbelievable. I do want to say that we can learn something about these people dying for what they believe, and it's that they genuinely believed it, not that the belief was true. So when we're analyzing them, we can say they were convinced, but we can't say that they were right.
The documentary evidence. Documentary evidence is a way that historians look for primary and secondary sources that help add to the historicity of an event. For primary sources, we have Matthew, John, and Paul, who all make references in 1 Corinthians 15, as well as James and his book, if you attribute him to the authorship.
So I want to talk a little bit about primary and secondary sources as he mentions them here. The definition of a primary source is a source that provides a first-hand account of an event or time period and are considered to be authoritative. They represent original thinking, report on discoveries or events, or they can share new information. They're usually written close to the time the event occurred, but they can also be written later. So first, we don't even know who the gospel writers were. The chances are the names that are associated with them aren't actually the individuals that wrote them. The gospel writers were not there to witness Jesus' death and resurrection. They're writing this decades later. And then we even have in Luke, he's directly saying that he's relying on other people's eyewitness accounts and stuff that's been written previously to compile his gospel. And we also know that he used Mark to supplement his gospel as well.
The circumstantial evidence. Doug Grotius notes that there's circumstantial evidence that adds to the historicity of the resurrection, namely the Lord's Supper, the baptism that was observed by the early church, as well as worship shifting to Sundays. It would have been extremely odd for faithful Jews who worshiped on Friday into Saturday to have shifted that worship to Sunday if a major event had not occurred.
This is another appeal to personal certainty, claiming that because somebody changed what they do on a certain day of the week is evidence that what they believe in is true is, again, ridiculous. It's another appeal to personal certainty. This is a garbage argument.
The missing motive. J. Warner Wallace mentions in some of his lectures that there's always three things behind a conspiracy being formed, and that's power, lust, and greed. Power, lust, and greed would not have benefited the disciples in any way for believing in the resurrection of Jesus. N.T. Wright says that the disciples had no theological motivation for believing and teaching the resurrection of Jesus unless it had actually come true.
This is an argument I heard a long time ago in one of my courses, and in reality, this is a false dichotomy. He's saying either a conspiracy was made, or it was a conspiracy to make this story, and it was done so for malicious reasons, or the story is true. When in reality, you can have people that truly believe Jesus was the Son of God and resurrected, but then they're also wrong. And Christians believe this happened with every other religion. Do you believe every other religion is a conspiracy theory? I don't think so. You think that they're genuine people that have believed something but were wrong. So how come when it comes to applying this to your faith, you're inconsistent?
Enemy attestation of the resurrection. Historically speaking, if one holds enemy attestation of an event, the event is said to be strengthened. This criteria is best exemplified in Matthew 28:11-15, when the authorities actually claim that the disciples stole the body of Jesus.
Enemy attestation. So there's a claim here that some words were said. And so, there's no actual evidence that those words were said. It's written down somewhere, yes, but obviously we don't believe everything that's written down because we're not 6 years old. And so this, again, I would categorize this as circular reasoning, saying this is true. The resurrection is true because also in this source, it says that there is attestation from enemies that the body was stolen. Those are two different claims that we need to assess individually, and you can't use one for the evidence of the other.
And finally, one of the strongest evidences for the resurrection of Jesus is the post-resurrection appearances to many people. These post-resurrection appearances to the eyewitnesses occurred across a span of 40 days and happened in multiple places with multiple people, including women, all of the disciples, and even a group of over 500 people. This only adds further credibility in the reliability of the resurrection of Jesus Christ.
So the appearances, we've heard this before, especially the 500. I cannot believe anybody throws that out. That is a claim. There's a claim in the Bible that 500 people witnessed the resurrected Jesus Christ. That is not evidence that happened. That is a claim that it happened. Those are two different things. If you're going to take this as proof for historical fact, then you also have to agree with the Book of Mormon that when Joseph Smith was given the golden plates, tons of people were there to see it. And it's written down in a book, just like yours is, just like your story is. So is that true too? No, of course not, because Christianity, gets to live by different rules? What is this? Again, I want to reiterate that nobody who's throwing these claims out actually is consistent with them, because just because something is written in a book doesn't magically make it true. This is one of the biggest issues I see with Christian apologists, is that they believe already before looking at these claims. They believe that the Bible is inerrant and that it's the written word of God and that God is real and that Jesus resurrected. And then they go through and try and prove it. It's like, dude, you started at the wrong end. That's called motivated reasoning. And it's clear as day in these TikToks. So that's all I have for this video. I hope that you have a good Easter. I don't care if you're Christian, atheist, Catholic, Muslim, whatever. I do hope that you have a good Easter and that you find time to spend with your family and just relax a little bit. And so I hope you enjoyed this video. I grinded so I can get it out on Easter. And yeah, let me know what you think down below in the comments, and I will see you on the next one.